Well, good morning. How are you today? Man, I am so glad you're here, in part because as I was driving here from Greensburg, I was thinking, will anybody be at 10:45? So thank you for showing up today. It'd be really awkward if I were by myself, and I don't know what happened to the screen there, but surely it'll come back here in just a minute, hopefully. My name's Seth, in case we haven't had the opportunity to meet. And, I was thinking about those moments in time, and maybe you've experienced this before, where you wake up in the morning and like your day is a certain way, and then by the time you put your head on the pillow at night, something significant has changed. I was thinking about this coming Thursday is actually 24 years from 9/11. And I remember walking back from an 8 a.m. class that I had and walking into the dorm, and there were all these guys gathered around TV screens, and we saw that planes had been flown into the World Trade Center, and it just felt like the world was different, right? That's a significant one. They aren't always so significant. Sometimes it's an unexpected phone call. Maybe it's a report on TV. Maybe you get news that there's a virus, or maybe there's a knock on the door, or a job was offered, or you're given a diagnosis, or you get a scholarship in the mail, or you get that pregnancy test, and there are 2 lines, and it's like, oh my goodness, we're going to have a baby. There are moments in life when we're brought into what I would call life-altering circumstances, and the world is just kind of never the same, right? You wake up and it's one way, and then you put your head on the pillow and it's a new normal. It's like, well, we're not in Kansas anymore, Toto, are we, right? I mean, things are just so different. And so I just want to share one of my own experiences. I've had a lot of these over the years, but one of them involved a trip that I was invited to go on as I was a youth pastor at the time. Carrie and I had been married about 6 months, and I was invited to go to Brazil. There was going to be a pastor's conference, and I was asked to teach about student ministry to a bunch of Brazilian pastors. Now, as you might imagine, I kind of felt like a big deal, right? I mean, oh, wow, these Brazilian pastors, they want to hear about how I do student ministry, and it's so awesome in America, let me go explain to them how great I am and how great it is. And so I got down there. I was pretty excited to go. I got down there, and I found out the morning we arrived that the pastor's conference ended up being rescheduled till after I was gone. So I'm like, guess I'm not as big of a deal as I thought I was, right? And so now, and I found myself in this place where I don't even know why I'm here. That was the whole purpose of why I was on this trip, and now suddenly that's gone. And what I didn't anticipate during that time is that God was going to begin moving my heart in a way I never, ever, ever could have expected. And he did it by kind of placing these kind of questions in my mind and in my heart. It wasn't an audible voice, but throughout the 5 days or so that I was down there, God just began kind of prompting me with things. And there was this first question that was in my heart that I just couldn't shake. And the question was, whose kingdom are you building? Whose kingdom are you building? Are you about you, Seth, or are you about something bigger than you? Now, this felt like an unfair question to me because I'm a youth pastor, right? It's not like I'm building some great youth empire or anything like that. But, if I'm just really honest, I had dreams of, hey, maybe I'll get to be a minor Christian celebrity someday, And it was like, am I just living for me, or am I living for something bigger than me? Just before I had gone on this trip, I was reading through the book of Ecclesiastes, which is attributed to King Solomon, the wise king of Israel. And Solomon recognized that he was working hard to build a kingdom, but he would have to hand that over to someone else. And here's what he says in Ecclesiastes. He says, I hated all the things I had toiled for under the sun, all the things I worked for, because I must leave them to the one who comes after me. Solomon recognizes, we're all going to die, and I'm going to have to pass this on to someone else. He says, and who knows, nobody, who knows whether that person will be wise or foolish? I'm going to have to pass it on to someone else, and who knows what in the world they're going to do with that. And here's the problem with that. He says, yet they will have control over all the fruit of my toil, into which I have poured my effort and skill under the sun. He says, this too is meaningless. The word meaningless in Hebrew means it's like a vapor. It just kind of dissipates out into the ether. And so he's like, I work hard doing all this stuff for me, and in the end, I don't even know what's going to happen to us. So why even bother? What's the purpose? There is none. And so God, he began kind of prompting that in my mind and my heart, and he was asking me this question, whose kingdom are you building really? Now, I wasn't a highly paid youth pastor, which I think is an oxymoron anyway, because there really aren't any highly paid youth pastors. But in the midst of this, I'm kind of arguing back with God. I'm like, come on, I put my heart and soul into this ministry. Now, while we were down there with my newly freed up schedule, a group of us pastors, we were touring around and looking at these different church plants. And in order to do that, we were driving in a VW Kombi, which is like a Volkswagen white Twinkie on wheels, essentially. That's the best description I could think of. And you rolled the windows down. There was no air conditioning. It had vinyl seats that in that hot, humid environment, you just peel yourself off of, like as you're getting out. And the whole time I'm thinking like, man, this is so uncomfortable. You know the only place you can go and live like an American, it's in America. Nowhere else is like America. That's just the reality, except Canada is kind of close, but they use the metric system and say A at the end of sentences, and so, A, that's not good. But so we're visiting all these churches. It's hot, it's humid, there's road noise, so you can't really talk to each other, and I'm praying, asking God, and God's prompting me with these things. And the next day, he kind of prompted me with this idea of start building my kingdom. I'm like, I am building your kingdom. I'm giving my life to youth ministry. Like, what else do you want from me? I made it to the last day, and then God put this statement on my heart, and it was, go to Brazil. Go to Brazil. I'm like, yes, that's what our student ministry needs. We need to take students to Brazil. That'll be a great experience for them. And I began kind of scheming all day. How can I get students and do a short-term trip with them? And that afternoon, we were driving around the city of Recife, which is in the northeast region of Brazil. 3 to 4 million people live there. And the missionary pastor we were with, he pulled that Twinkie-like Kombi along the side of the road and stopped it in a neighborhood and said, I'd like to pray that God would raise up somebody to start a church here. We're all praying. And as we finished, this pastor looks at me and he says, Seth, you should think about planting a church someday. And in those moments, clearly as I have ever heard God speak, these are the words that he gave me. He said, I didn't tell you to take your students to Brazil. I told you to go to Brazil. I was like, but it's hot and humid here, and I don't like this. Like it's uncomfortable. It was great to visit. I didn't want to live there. That evening, we went to this Bible study in an apartment in Recife, and all these Brazilians were asking me, when are you coming back? When are you coming back? Now, I didn't know at the time. They just always ask Americans that, when are you coming back? But it just felt like, I'm like, never. I'm not coming back. I'm not interested in moving to Brazil. But that night, we went on a beach walk in Recife. It's right on the ocean, and I mean, I felt like God was pulling out all the stops. It's a little manipulative to use a beach walk on me, but that's what he was doing. And he asked it, again, just kind of this final question. And it was this, Seth, are you willing to give up building your kingdom so I can use you to build mine? Like, do you want to spend your life living it for you, or are you willing to allow me to use you for something so much bigger? And I tell you what, it was a heart-wrenching, like, Lord, what do I want to do here? And I remember again coming to this point where I say, okay, God, if you can use me, I'm willing. And I went home. Carrie was not with me on the trip. Literally the first words out of my mouth, she says, how was your trip? And I said, well, do you want to move to Brazil? And we began a journey. And man, the week after that, I'll never forget. It was like, you wake up that day and it's one way and you go to bed and it's different. And I remember driving around Greenwood, Indiana, and just knowing my days there were numbered and that God had something new. And I knew everything was going to be vastly different. The world was seemingly the same, but my world had drastically changed. And there are a lot of stories I could tell you about our experience in Brazil, but one that I think is appropriate for where we're going today and what we're going to talk about here in just a minute relates to our fundraising. Like, to go as missionaries, you have to raise funds, and it's a lot of money, and you have to figure all that out. And I don't like asking people for money, which is good for you all, right? That I don't like asking people for money. I let John do that because he's part Jewish, and that works. I stole that joke from Scott in Greensburg, and he's fully Jewish, so I felt like it's okay. Sorry if I offended anybody with that. But anyway, so where were we? Talking about raising money. And so, I didn't like asking people, and I sent one fundraising letter out. I asked one person who told us no. And so one day, it was like November, and I got a note from somebody that they wanted to support us at $300 a month. And I was just blown away. That was significant. And Carrie and I, we hadn't asked this person to give. I don't even think they got a letter from us. He just reached out on his own. God had put it on his heart. And I remember that night, we were driving to, I think, a small group, and I just looked at Carrie and I said, we're not going to Brazil. God is taking us to Brazil. Like, this is not about us. This is about what God is doing. About 5 months later, we were almost to that threshold where we needed to be in order to buy our plane tickets. And another family reached out, somebody we hadn't asked to give to us. And they gave us a one-time gift that put us over the threshold to be able to buy our tickets, to have enough for our starting expenses, to buy a car. I mean, it was absolutely mind-boggling. There are missionaries who spend 5 years trying to raise support. God provided it for us in 6 months. 6 months. It was mind-boggling, and do you know what else it was? It was only God. It was only God. And I share that today because we're beginning this new series, Only God, but we're also beginning something brand new here at Community Church. And as you've heard already, I mean, today was the start of a 9 a.m. service here in Batesville, where we're streaming the sermon from Greensburg all the way here. And I just look at that and I just say, God, you are doing something in our midst. This year alone, we're still at a 20% growth rate year to date. Last year, we were at a 10 to 15% growth rate all year long. I mean, God is just bringing people, and it's a little bit overwhelming. It's beyond what we anticipated, and that's good. Like, we're excited for it. But 5 to 6 years ago, we did some major renovations in Greensburg. We added children's classrooms here. We renovated this space upstairs to make room for more adults. We had no idea how quickly it would fill up and create some fun problems. Great problems, but still problems. And so it's just amazing to see God at work and God moving. And man, as I was praying about what to share today, those words that came over to me again and again were only God, only God. Only God brought us here today where we are. And man, I pray and I hope that only God will take us where we're going. I pray that it is not about me, it's not about John or Rachel or anybody else on staff, but it's about what God is doing and where he is leading us. Kind of like that lesson that God taught me on the beach in Recife, Brazil in 2009. This is not about us. It is about communicating to our communities the incredible love that God has for them, that he demonstrated by sending his son into the world. Now, if you came to our church since 2020, you may not realize the significance of where we are, but it really is significant because I came on staff about 13 and a half years ago. I was the campus pastor, hired to be the campus pastor here in Batesville. Things were very different in our church. There were people who were wounded. There was trust with leadership that was broken. Things were a little bit messy, and we're not going to go into all those details. But essentially, I was hired as the campus pastor. We had this building that was a total mess. Amex Well wasn't here. I was embarrassed to even have people walk through our doors because it was just like a construction zone downstairs, and we had no money to figure out any of that. And I remember going home some days being so discouraged and just praying, God, why did you bring us here? Why did you bring us here? See, as much as God had paved the way for us to go to Brazil and just like flung that door open wide, he also slammed it shut really quickly. We went to Brazil for about 6 months, during which time we applied for visas, permanent visas. We were on tourist visas, so you can only be there for 6 months on tourist visas. We knew we would have to go back home at the end of those 6 months and hoping to pick up our visas at the embassy, but as it turns out, those visas were denied. And so we had to spend another 6 months in the United States figuring out and praying, okay, God, what are you doing? And we went back to Brazil because we had a car, we had an apartment, we had fully furnished, all our stuff was down there. We were all in, and it was like God just said, you're done. I just wanted you to come down here for 6 months or a year, and then I'm going to send you back home, right? So we were there for another 6 months, finished up some work down there, got rid of all the stuff we had bought. I mean, it was just crazy. We didn't plan on any of that. It was confusing and it was frustrating, but then God paved a way for us to come here at Community Church, and we weren't looking for it. We didn't anticipate it, but he did. He brought us here. And I'll be honest, it's been a difficult road in many regards. And there are times when I've prayed that, God, why? Why did you bring us here? But do you know what I've discovered throughout this journey? That when God wants to move, he doesn't look for perfect conditions, and he also doesn't look for perfect people. But do you know what he looks for? He looks for broken hearts of surrender. He looks for people who say, here I am. I'm willing. I might be inadequate. I don't know if I have the skill set you need. But when you follow me, when you are willing, you will in the end get to see what only God can do. And I can just stand here today and say, I look back at the history of this church and I just say, man, it is impossible. This is not the work of human hands. This is only only God. Only God could heal the hurt that existed here. Only God could breathe new life, particularly in our Greensburg campus. Only God could take the brokenness and allow us to be not just a place of healing, but a beacon of hope in our communities. The hard part is, when you get to the end, it's great to look back and see, right? But the time leading up to that, the beginning and the middle of those only God stories, those are the painful parts. Those are the parts that we would love to avoid if we could. I mean, it's easy to look back, but isn't it true we'd prefer to experience the end of an only God story rather than the beginning or the middle? All right? I mean, isn't it great on the other side of the Red Sea when Moses can look back and say, hey, look where God brought us. It's not so great as you're walking through in the walls of water and not sure if it's going to come crashing down on you. It's in the beginning and the middle that we experience pain. It's on the other side that we get to see what God is doing. And there has been pain. People have left. Some people are angry. As many have come. There have been as many who have left. There are restless nights. There's wondering, God, are we doing the right thing? There's doubt, discouragement, hopelessness, frustration. And yet God invites us regularly into these spaces. I am absolutely convinced that it's not the exception, but it's what he wants for us. And not just for me, for every single one of us who are his followers. And he's not just inviting us to the end. He's inviting us to the beginning and the middle and to the entire story. And so over the next 4 weeks, we're going to be examining an only God story that exists in the book of Nehemiah from the Old Testament. And I love this story because in many ways it shows how God births a vision in us, how he kind of breaks our heart for a need in the world, how he invites us in, and then how he enables us to accomplish his work. And at the end, we get to be on the other side of it and say, wow, that was hard. Wow, that was a lot of work, but there is no way we could have done this on our own. It only happened because God showed up. And it is a privilege, and it is a challenge, and it is, an invitation for us. And so I want to give you kind of the bottom line of this entire series before we dive into Nehemiah. And the reason I want to give it to you is because, I believe God is inviting every single one of us into this. So the bottom line of the series is this, that when my obedience meets God's faithfulness, I get to see what only God can do. I want you to say that with me because I think it's really important. Ready? When my obedience meets God's faithfulness, I get to see what only God can do. And this is absolutely true, but I don't know if you noticed there's a lot of I and my in there. And it's only in the last couple hundred years that the church has become so individualized and so kind of commercialized and consumerized, and it's all about me. But the history of the church is that we're a gathering of people that is more about we. And when God gives us a vision, it's not just about me, but it's about we. So really the bottom line is this, when our obedience meets God's faithfulness, we get to see what only God can do. Or for the left-brain people in the room, you may be one. Here's a simple equation. I made it math for you. Our obedience plus God's faithfulness equals only God. And there is no other explanation other than God showed up. And he had to show up. And when he does, we get to see the miracles. We get to see the changed hearts. We get to see the transformed lives. We get to see doors open that we never thought would be open. We get to see God's miraculous provision. And I don't know why it's so surprising to us when we get to see it, because I was shocked when all that money came in. I was shocked. I don't know why I was shocked. I should have known that if God is inviting us to it, he's going to provide for it. What he wants is my faithfulness, and he meets my obedience with his faithfulness. And that's when we see what only God can do. And if you stay obedient long enough, you too will get to see it. Okay. Here's how the account of Nehemiah goes. It says, in the month of Kislev, which is the Jewish calendar, Hebrew calendar, is like November, December. So it's right before Christmas, except they didn't celebrate Christmas because Jesus wasn't born yet. And he wasn't born in December anyway, but that's another story for another time. In the month of Kislev, in the 20th year, he's talking about the 20th year of King Artaxerxes I, being the king of Persia. Okay, so he's giving us a time frame and helping us to understand these are real events that took place in the real history of the world. It's not once upon a time in a galaxy far, far away. These are real people, real time. He says, while I was in the citadel of Susa. Now, there are several important dates and events. If you're new to Bible study, I just like to throw this out here because, again, I just think it's helpful to understand history. So we'll see who paid attention a couple weeks ago. The first one is 722 BC. Anybody know what happened in 722 BC? There's a nation. Anybody know the nation? Yes, whoever said that, you win a prize. You get a donut afterward. Assyria, thank you, Chris. Yeah, the Assyrians conquered the northern kingdom of Israel. And then in 586 BC, anybody know this one? Chris? Babylon. Somebody said it. Oh, you guys are way smarter than the Greensburg crowd, but don't tell them I said that. Just kidding. I probably just couldn't hear them. It's a little farther from the stage. Yeah, the Babylonians, Nebuchadnezzar came in, and he destroyed the walls of Jerusalem. Jerusalem's in the southern area of Israel. He destroyed the walls. He destroyed the temple. He burned the city to the ground, and then he took a lot of Israelites into exile. Okay, so then Nebuchadnezzar died, which opened the door for another world power. Nebuchadnezzar was a great leader, but then another world power came about. We'll see who's really smart, because this is the hard one. 538 BC, anybody know what happened? Cyrus the Great of Persia. The Persians came in. And here's the cool thing about Cyrus the Great. His policy was to repatriate people. He wanted to send people back to their homeland. So all these people who had been exiled from Israel, they got sent back to their homelands to rebuild their temples. They were allowed to worship their gods. They were to rebuild their homes. And his belief was that an occupied territory, a stable territory, meant a loyal territory. And that was the best defense for his empire. So around 515 BC, the temple was rebuilt in Jerusalem. And over about a 100-year time period, people were going back. They were re-inhabiting the land. They were rebuilding their homes. And now the Jewish people are home. They're rebuilding, trying to get back to life as normal. And Nehemiah is in the citadel of Susa, which is the summer home for the Persian king. Now, he grew up in exile. He's actually a second-generation exile, which means he probably grew up in Persia. He probably has never even been to his family's homeland. Things are a little bit tense for Artaxerxes at this point in time because there had been a revolt in Egypt, which was part of his empire. It took 5 years to tamp down that revolt. And so he's nervous about other people potentially revolting. Nehemiah, he's the cupbearer for the king, which means he tastes the wine, he eats the food before the king does to make sure nobody's trying to poison the king. So he's a highly trusted advisor. He stands next to the king in public, so he's probably an attractive man. He probably is wise of the ways of government and workings, and he's probably an advisor to the king. So Nehemiah tells us this. He says, Hananiah, one of my brothers, came from Judah with some other men, and I questioned them about the Jewish remnants that had survived the exile and also about Jerusalem. He wants to know how his family is doing back in their homeland, all these people that have moved back in this city that he's never visited. Well, the news he receives, it's actually very devastating. Here's what they say to him. They say, those who survived the exile and are back in the province are in great trouble and disgrace. The wall of Jerusalem is broken down and its gates have been burned with fire. Now, this is not new news. In 586, when Nebuchadnezzar came in, he's the one who tore down those walls, but they haven't been able to rebuild them. And in an ancient city, walls were important for the safety of the people. It kept raiders out. It helped keep the city secure. So with the walls down, people aren't safe. There had been an attempt to rebuild the walls, but because of Artaxerxes' fear of what happened in Egypt, he kind of put that to an end. So the message that the people of Jerusalem and the surrounding areas got is, I don't care about this city. I'm not going to protect it. They are unarmed, and they are open for business. Now, Nehemiah, he hears all this, and he's just devastated for his people. You think these people who have been exiled for 100 years, they're traveling back to their homeland, and it's just a war zone. Here's what he says. He says, when I heard these things, I sat down and I wept. He's crushing. It breaks Nehemiah's heart. I was thinking about this, and I was thinking about how when we get news of things going on that are heartbreaking, maybe because we hear it so much, isn't it easy to just kind of harden yourself to it? Be like, that's somewhere else. I don't have to worry about that. I was thinking about the school shooting that took place recently at the Catholic school and just how heartbreaking it was. And then time goes on and you move on and you don't think much about it. But Nehemiah, he's heartbroken. And he responds. He continues, he says this, he says, for some days I mourned and I fasted and I prayed before the God of heaven. When I heard what was happening to my people, it broke my heart. And I grieved and I mourned. See, when God gets a hold of your heart, that's when he's about to move. You're going to see an only God moment. When God starts getting a hold of your heart and you begin praying and you begin mourning. Now, this took place over about a 3 to 4 month time period. I mean, he's wrestling with this. He's grieving over this. And God is beginning to move. The beautiful thing is we actually get to see Nehemiah's prayer. And so we're going to just read the prayer and then we're going to close. But first, I just want to ask you this question. What breaks your heart? I mean, really, what breaks your heart? Are there any situations? Are there any people? Maybe it's somebody in your family. Maybe it's an extended family. Maybe it's somebody at work or at school. Somebody you know of, a family you know of, a situation in our community. You just say, oh, that isn't right. That isn't right. I hate that it's this way. As we read this prayer that Nehemiah prays, I want to invite you to be thinking about what it is that breaks your heart and have that in mind. Because it could be that God is inviting you into one of his only God stories. Here's what Nehemiah prays. He says, Lord, the God of heaven, you are the creator of it all. You are the great and awesome God who keeps his covenant of love with those who love him and who keep his commandments. Now, there's a reference here to the covenant that God established with his people, the nation of Israel, which is not our covenant, by the way. That was a covenant for the nation of Israel. We have a covenant with Jesus that is also a covenant of love where he gave his life for us. It's a different covenant, but he talks about this covenant of love. God, you made this agreement with Israel that if they would obey you, they would receive your blessing. He continues on, he says, let your ear be attentive and your eyes open to hear the prayer your servant is praying before you day and night for your servants, the people of Israel. I'm not just praying for me, I'm praying for we. My heart is breaking. He says, I confess the sins we Israelites, including myself and my father's family, have committed against you. He says, look, I'm culpable too. I'm not going to point my fingers at everyone else and how they've failed and how they've sinned. I'm going to own my own. Sin runs deep through this nation and through my family. He continues and says this. He says, we have acted very wickedly toward you. We have not obeyed the commands, decrees, and laws you gave your servant Moses. He says, I'm confessing my unfaithfulness. And when's the last time you confessed your unfaithfulness? When's the last time you stood before God and just said, man, God, I have messed up. I have fallen short. God, I have sinned. I'm broken. God, I need you. I need you in this situation. I need you in my life. I need you in my family. I need you in my school. I need you at my job. This is how the only God stories begin, with an acknowledgement of our need. I love what he says next. He reminds God of his promises to them. He says, remember, God, the instructions you gave your servant Moses, saying, if you're unfaithful, I'll scatter you among the nations. But if you return to me and obey my commands, then even if your exiled people are at the farthest horizon, I will gather them from there and bring them to the place I have chosen as a dwelling for my name. I know how unfaithful we have been. I know we are reaping the consequences of our decisions. But God, remember your promise to us. Remember your promise that if we would turn back to you, you would take us back. He says, look, God, I come empty-handed, but I am not uninvited. You have invited us to return, and that's what we are trying to do. And next, he actually quotes Moses. Moses was pleading on behalf of the Israelites. Here's what he says. He says, they are your servants and your people, whom you redeemed by your great strength and your mighty hand. Don't forget your people. Don't forget the work that you have done. Don't let the story end here, God. And he pleads with God. He says, Lord, let your ear be attentive to the prayer of this your servant and to the prayer of your servants who delight in revering your name. He says, give your servant success today by granting him favor in the presence of this man. He's talking about King Artaxerxes. He says, look, I have nothing here to offer, God, other than my willingness. I have nothing, but I am invited to come. And if anything's going to be done, you're going to have to move the heart of Artaxerxes. This isn't something that I can do. God, I'll be obedient. Will you be faithful? This is beyond my hands. It has to be only God. You know what inspires me so much about this account as we're going to go through it in the next couple of weeks is it's a reminder that so much in this world hinges on so little. I mean, Israel was at this breaking point, and the question was, will they even make it? Will this nation continue? Can it ever thrive again? Will God's blessing continue being on these people? And thank goodness it was, because this is where Jesus came from. Our Messiah comes through this line of the Jewish people. But at this point, nobody knew. Nehemiah had no idea when he woke up that day what that day would hold for him and how God would break his heart. But it was a day something was going to change and God was going to make his presence known. It was just an ordinary day when Moses was out tending sheep and he saw this burning bush. It was a normal day when David was out with his sheep and Samuel showed up and says, hey, I want to anoint you as king. It was a frustrating day for Peter, Andrew, James, and John as they were fishing and washing their nets, and they'd had a night where they didn't catch anything. And Jesus says, hey, why don't you cast your nets over there? I'm going to do something for you. I want to make you fishers of men. Paul was on a trip to Damascus when he was blinded by a light and he met Jesus on the road. He was known as Saul of Tarsus at that point, and Jesus said, Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me? And God was inviting him to be the voice that would go out into the non-Jewish world to communicate the hope of Jesus. My friends, you just never know when it's going to happen. There just has to be a willingness to say, okay, God, here I am. Here I am. I'll obey you. I'll own my sin. And I want to invite you in to do what only you can do. Maybe today's a day like that for you. In fact, let me ask you, where is God inviting you to let your heart be broken? When that comes, ask some questions. I mean, that's what Nehemiah did. He asked some curious questions. Okay, what's going on? Tell me how things are in Jerusalem. Pray for sensitivity, that you'll be sensitive to where God wants to work. I mean, what burden are you feeling? Begin praying about that. Over a period of time, Nehemiah prayed for 3 to 4 months, and God was at work. I'll tell you what, there have been a number of times throughout this journey where I've quite honestly just questioned, God, am I really the right person for this job? Because, I mean, working in the church is hard. You know, you're working among friends. You care about all the people. You make decisions that make 50% of the people angry, and they feel like you're targeting them, but you're not. And it's like you can't win sometimes, and then they leave, and I don't like the music. I don't like the songs. I don't like the speaking. I don't like the children, whatever. I mean, I don't like the times of the service. Hopefully you like the children. The children are great. I mean, it's just hard. And then you make it a multi-site church. And there's all kinds of weird dynamics that come into that of staff at both places and trying to care well for 2 communities. And it's just hard. And there are times when I'm like, I suck at this. God, do you want somebody else? I remember a while ago just praying, Lord, I don't know if I'm the right person. But saying, God, but I'm willing. Like, I'm not trying to leave, but if I don't want to hold so tightly to something that isn't mine to hold on to, I want to trust you with it. And if you want somebody else, bring somebody else in. I don't want to get in the way of what you want to do here. And in those moments, the thing that God said to me was, Seth, what I want is your willingness and your obedience. That's what I want. And then I'll snap my fingers and it'll all be easy. Ha, ha, ha. Just kidding. I'll take your obedience and I'll add my faithfulness to it, and you'll get to see what only God can do. And that's why we're here today. That's why we're here today. God's not done here. God's not done in your life either. He has something good for you. He has something good for you. And he's still looking for people who have broken hearts and who are willing to obey and who are willing to invite him in and say, God, what do you want me to do? You've got me. Use me. And you weep and you pray. And then you get to see how he wants to move. And next week we'll talk more about that. Let me pray for us. God, thanks so much for bringing us to today. Thanks for the work that you're doing here in us, through Community Church. It is not about any one of us here. It is about your kingdom and pointing people to Jesus, because he is the only hope we have. God, I just thank you for inviting us into the story, inviting us to be a part, getting to see what you are doing, getting to say, man, that was amazing. It was only God. God, I don't know where you might be moving people today, where you've maybe caught their attention, where there's a situation in their lives that's kind of broken their hearts. Would you help them to ask curious questions? Would you get them on their knees in prayer and confession and just say, God, here I am. If you want to use me in this, here I am. And then, God, would we get to see what only you can do? Thanks for this time, Lord. I pray in Jesus' name. Amen.